One of my favorite parts of being a priest is teaching. Of course, I'm an actual, classroom teacher licensed by the state of Nebraska. I've taught in Catholic schools for 13 years. I've taught kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, and 11th grade. I guess I stayed away from most of the even-numbered classes, but sort of makes me an odd guy, I guess. Dad jokes. Okay. If I wasn't a priest, I would still be a teacher. My plan was to get my degree in architectural engineering, which I did, and then to work for 3 years in the field of architectural engineering. I was interested in surveying, and then return to teach architectural engineering at the school where I had attended, where I got my degree. And I'm glad that I didn't do that for a number of reasons, obviously. But one of them was because the college no longer offers an architectural engineering program, so I don't know where I'd be. But you know from the story last week how both of my mother's parents were one-room schoolhouse teachers, so it must be in my blood. One of the highlights of my week is teaching adult education classes for those who are preparing to join the church at Easter. And the thought comes to me often, I wish every single Catholic could take these classes. And most Catholics, they have an 8th grade CCD, level of education, understanding their faith, because that's their last opportunity. And after that comes high school and college and adult life and family. And so our education in the faith is usually at a teenage level, unless we, specialize in it somehow or go to the seminary. So I always have this feeling that I need to do somehow better for all of you. I've been contemplating this for quite some time, just waiting for the right time to go ahead with it, and that right time never arrived. And basically, the thought is, what if I just broke up my adult education classes into 15-minute chunks and preached on every single topic that I covered? And that's a daunting task because I usually divide it up in about 25 classes, and each of those classes is about an hour long. Some of them are a couple of hours long, and if you divide that by 15 minutes, you get over 100 homilies. Now you subtract Lent and Advent and Christmas and Easter from all of that, and you come out to about what amounts to be at least 3 years worth of homilies, which is why I've always hesitated to do it. It's pretty daunting. Basically, my idea is that if I'm wearing green, I will be preaching these types of homilies. I don't even know if I'll be here in 3 years, but I asked the bishop to stay for 5 years every year, so it's worked so far. But nothing's guaranteed, so why not just take the plunge? I'm fully prepared to abandon this idea if I feel it's not working or if nobody appreciates it. And to all those who have taken these classes from me, Josh and Darcy, I apologize. You're going to be hearing it again. But as always, these homilies will be recorded and posted to my YouTube page. However, rather than being labeled by the date, as they usually are, they're going to be labeled by the topic so that you can follow along. It'll be something, today's title is the number 1, God, because that's the topic. But I'll put them into a playlist so that you don't have to, scroll through, years and years of my homilies on my YouTube page. You can just go to the playlist tab and then click on these special homilies without any of the off-topic homilies mixed in. So, like I said, pretty logical starting point. We're going to start with God tonight. Everything in our mind, everything that we know, everything that we learn throughout our lifetime comes to us in one of two ways. Either, number 1, we experience it for ourselves, or number 2, we are taught it by somebody else. Those are really the only two options. We either figure it out on our own or we learn it from somebody else. So first, the things that we experience on our own. What I have found with those things is that the truths that I've come to learn on my own, they're just that. They're sort of my own. They are mostly personal experiences, of course. And the things that I have come to learn on my own are decidedly subjective, meaning that they basically are for me. They apply to me. They're lessons that I've learned. And these subjective experiences might not be true for other people. And maybe they don't relate to those experiences. The second option, the things that I've come to know by being taught, well, those are far more objective, meaning that these truths exist outside of me. They are observable. They are learnable by everybody. Here's an example. If you have a medical condition, and you know what that medical condition is like because you've had it before, and you can relate to people who have had that same medical condition. That's the first type of knowledge, that personal experience. But then there's the second type of knowing where you are taught. You taught why you have that medical condition. You are taught how to manage it by doctors and specialists, maybe even therapists. So that's what I'm sort of talking about when there's two types of knowing, the knowing of personal experience and the knowing of being taught. However, we come into this world with very little personal experience, obviously. I've never seen the pyramids of Egypt, but I was taught that they're there, so I sort of believe it. I've never calculated the speed of light, but I was taught that it is 186,000 miles per second. I have never seen a blue whale, but I know that it's the largest known animal. I know that lightning is hotter than the surface of the sun, but I've never measured either the surface of the sun or lightning. I was taught all of these things. And it turns out that most of what we know comes from that second category of learning that we're taught, that second category of knowledge. Now you might be asking, why in the world is this guy going on talking about two types of knowledge? What does that have to do with God? It's because of this. Most people probably put religion into the first category, the category of personal experience. It's a personal thing, it's subjective, but that isn't the entire truth. Because there are facts to religion, at least to the Catholic faith there are. Almost all of what I'm going to be talking about in this very long series of homilies is in the second category of knowledge. Knowledge gained from being taught. This category of knowing is based off of findings shared by the human race, handed on from generation to generation, slowly building knowledge over time. So very little of what I'm going to be talking about will be experiential based. It'll be based in sort of knowledge and fact. It'll be mostly informational. So if I ever need to take a break and actually talk about spiritual stuff, we'll do that. But it's going to be almost like a Catholicism science lab. Because in fact there is a science to the Catholic faith. Facts that have been studied and debated upon and agreed upon and handed on to the next generation. I also want to flip that idea upside down, though, because not only is religion a type of science, but I will be so bold to say is that science is a type of faith. We trust what science tells us is true, right? Even though science is constantly changing. Depending on the year, coffee is either really good for you or it's terrible for you, right? We take a ton of stuff on faith alone, not just religion. Almost every aspect of our life requires faith. At every turn of our life, we're being taught something. We're being given information. If we needed to experience something in order to know anything, then we would have very little knowledge. And so, by necessity, we learn from others rather than ourselves. And in that sense, religion and science are very much the same. We have to trust that the information we're getting is correct, at least as correct as we can make it. So how do we know when to have faith in something and when not to? Well, we have faith because we judge the speaker to be trustworthy. We trusted our teachers growing up and that they were taught correctly. And in our case with religion, the trustworthy teacher is thousands of years of history. Our teacher is accounts of people's interactions with the divine. Our teacher is in many cases God himself. And ultimately it comes down to that. Ultimately it comes down to whether or not we believe that what God says is trustworthy. So the bottom line is faith, which brings us to our first definition of what will be many over the years. Faith is this: it is a gift of God where we believe in God and the truths that he has revealed. A gift of God where we believe in God and the truths he has revealed. So faith isn't just saying, yeah, I believe in God. It's saying, I believe what God is trying to teach me, which is a little different. So what do we know about God? What do we know about the source of our knowledge of the divine? How do we even know that there's a God in the first place? That question has been wrestled with for probably the entirety of the existence of the human race. In the 12th century, St. Thomas Aquinas approached that question of the existence of God from a logical perspective. Based off of pure human reason, he came up with what are now known as the 5 proofs of God's existence. And I'm not going to go through each of them. Most of them are philosophical and way above my head, even though I studied philosophy. So the one that I'll address is the 5th proof for God, and that is his argument from intelligent design. St. Thomas starts this line of his argument by noting how well ordered the universe really is. And order is not accidental. If everything were truly and completely random, then nothing would really exist. There would be no properties to any materials. Chemistry would be impossible. The laws of nature would be impossible. If it were completely, truly random, it would be nothing. But there is something. Even basic elements have atomic weights and electrical charges that work together to form substances. And that's a huge coincidence if it's all just random. It points to order even on the most fundamental of levels. The fact that these substances have been made into living organisms is unimaginable if everything were random. One study that I know of concluded that it would take trillions and trillions of universes worth of matter randomly colliding together in order to produce one living thing. The universe is not random. It has order and it has direction. There is the old trope that a group of monkeys typing randomly on keyboards, given enough time, would reproduce the works of Shakespeare. And that's nonsense, because the works of Shakespeare are not just words on a page. In the first lines of his play, The Tempest, Shakespeare purposely words phrases so that they sound like the roaring waters and winds of a storm on the sea. Lots of long S sounds linked together to recreate the hissing of the winds. Shakespeare works, on the one hand, within the rules of poetry, meter and rhythm, but he will purposely and obviously break meter and rhythm to make a point, in order to call attention to a certain line or a certain event. And breaking those standards in a purposeful way is the exact opposite of random. So no, monkeys will never type a Shakespearean play. There is an intelligence likewise built into the universe. A scientist might say, well, yes, the intelligence of the universe is the laws of science itself. In fact, they often argue that. Science is what gives order to nature. But that's like saying the recipe is what makes the cookies. Well, what about the baker? Standard science can't answer any questions about the baker. It's not designed to. That's what the science of religion seeks to answer. Who is the baker who gave us the recipe? Who made the laws of science? If you were walking through the woods and you found 48 walnuts in a perfect circle, all evenly spaced around the trunk of an oak tree, would you think, oh wow, how did this oak tree grow walnuts? Or would you think, oh wow, this randomly just fell perfectly into place, evenly spaced? No. You would think, who put these here? It's the same with science, the same question we're asking. When you look at a painting, you know that there was a painter. And when you look at that painting and contemplate it, you learn something about the person who painted it. And that's what the science of religion aims to answer. If the Big Bang Theory is true, had to be caused by science, but the science of religion aims to answer questions that go beyond that. If the theory of evolution are true, it had to be started somehow, in some way. Even the scientific principles in it had to be invented somehow or thought up. Our time in these series of homilies will be spent looking wider than the laws of nature, asking questions the laws of science cannot answer because it's not within the expertise of science. It always makes me laugh when atheist scientists try to disprove God. Well, God exists outside of the universe. How can you prove or disprove anything about him? God is not part of the discipline of standard science. Standard science only gives us glimpses of God in his creation. So I say, so what if our body evolved from apes? The question that we're asking here is, where did our soul come from? Who ultimately made us? How can science explain miracles that don't make sense? How can science explain ghosts or demonic possession? Why do we seem to exist in both the physical and the spiritual worlds? How is it possible that I can be asleep for 20 minutes and have a dream that lasts an entire day? Clearly, part of us exists outside of time and outside of space and outside of measurable science. These are questions that science can't answer. And even religion can merely approach these things, and it never masters them. Fortunately, though, God has revealed himself to us in human history. We have the ability to think and to seek God by observing the world around us, but God also gives us help along the way. There are things that we cannot know about God unless he reveals them to us. And that's how it works when it comes to people. We can know some things about them. The first time you saw me, you knew some things about me just by looking at me, but you can't know everything about a person unless he or she tells you. And since God has shown us that he is a person, free of them, it works the same way. We can know things about him simply by observation, but we cannot know everything about him unless he tells us, and he has. So yes, there are things that we can know about God, but there are crucial things that we can know about God only because he tells us. And these things happen to reveal some very powerful truths about ourselves. So we need to listen to him. We need to learn from our teacher, God himself, because he is the God of creation, the God of science, the God who made us, the author of the entire story. And he's revealed himself to be trustworthy. So join me over the coming months and even years to learn about this science that we call faith.